Hey
Hey
guys,
guys,
I'm Leslie,
and I'm David,
and this is where we do stuff. So we thought that for our first video on this channel, we would kick off a series that we're going to be calling Xbox Game Pass.
Play or pass.
And what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to be going through all of the games on Xbox Game Pass,
All of them.
and we're going to play them. We're going to leave a review.
Yep. And we're going to deem those games worthy of playing or passing.
Okay, so if you guys are interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to follow us along on our journey as we do this, you can hop on over to twitch.tv/Leslie the Defiler, or
What he said / Prime Apex 77.
and you come hang out with us while we're kind of compiling these reviews. So without further ado,
Yeah, let's kick off that first game. Let's call it number 1 of 391 at least. And we're going to get started with Warhammer 40K's Darktide.
so without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So before we get started on character creation, I did want to go ahead and address the fact that we do know that there are other games in the Warhammer universe, like Vermintide, but we're really just going to be looking at Darktide as a standalone game. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk character creation. So my thoughts on character creation is that whenever you load into it and you start looking at all the options, I don't think you're going to be that impressed. Okay, whenever I was looking at it, it did seem very bare bones. Okay, so you really just had like a few options for each choice, and honestly my opinion is that none of them really looked stunning visually, and it was just really about making the least ugly character you could with the ugly options you were given. And maybe that is just the universe, and I could be wrong, but it didn't really seem like I was able to make a character that I could really see myself in. And it really just felt like they were doing the bare minimum to get you through character creation into the gameplay.
Yeah, and I think I'd have to agree with that because my biggest issue with it was just, yeah, it's fugly. It really is. I mean, especially the hair, you'll see some of the textures seem like they weren't really matched up the way they needed to be. But my biggest issue is I play games for immersion. Like Leslie said, I want to be able to put myself into my character's shoes and just escape my world for a little bit. So, what I felt was the issue is there weren't enough options for that. Because I'm not the ugliest man, but I don't think there's a lot of people in this world that are as ugly as these characters come out to be. So it was just really hard for me to get immersed with the very few options I had. And so, first impressions, wasn't impressed, but it's all right. We'll get into the game. We'll figure out what we like.
And that being said, some of the fugly characters that other people made and you'll see running around are pretty funny.
Oh, yeah, you definitely don't feel alone in your fugly world, but at the very least, there's not one beautiful soul to be seen.
All right, let's jump right into the actual game now. So, the first thing we want to note is the graphics, okay? We're talking first impressions, and if you're me and I'm you, then the first thing I look at is what does the world look like around me? I want to see some graphics that kind of wow me, or at the very least hold the standard of what I've seen. And so, looking at this, I wasn't super wowed. In fact, it honestly kind of reminded me and resembled sort of like an Xbox One vibe when we had just passed the precipice of Xbox 360 into that next gen. So I don't have high marks to give this as far as graphics go. Now, the background, these maps that were built, they are beautiful.
So as you join into these different maps, what you're gonna notice is that they put a lot of detail into the environment, and you can definitely tell that they're trying to set a theme, either by dirty, grungy cities or sewers, or these kind of a little bit more open fortress overtaken by deserts. So that is really, really cool to see as you join into these.
And for a game that kind of lacks a little bit in storytelling, you kind of realize that the storytelling is in that environment. Looking around you, getting very small glimpses of what it is you're actually doing, but getting big glimpses through the world you're in, the map you're in, the environment around you. It does a lot to help tell that story.
And one of the important things to note is that while we were actually playing the game, we got a very steady performance. I don't think we ever noticed any frame drops or any crashes. It ran pretty consistently the entire time that we were playing it. So the overall impressions did leave us feeling very positive going into the rest of the game there.
It was enough to tease and get us optimistic about the gameplay and just jumping into the action.
So this brings us into the next part of our review, the real meat of everything, the gameplay.
The gameplay. The meat.
So talking about gameplay, I think the biggest shining moment in this is anytime that you get to use a melee weapon. I mean, right from the very beginning, whenever they hand you a shovel, of all things, just a dull, rusty shovel, and you take your first swing at one of those enemies, you immediately feel just how impactful these weapons feel. Because whenever you go for any locational damage, you'll feel it. You go for an enemy's head, it's going to come right off. You go for an enemy's legs, boom, they're gone. So anytime in any melee weapon that you get to use, you get to feel just like such a badass using them.
Yeah, honestly, I gotta say the same thing. I even want to reiterate the locational damage in this game is freaking stellar. It's so much fun. I mean, you can uppercut them, lower cut them, cut out their legs out from under them. I mean, it's a blast, really, just intentionally swinging where you want to. So melee is definitely where this game shines. Let's get into sort of the duller part, which I think would be the guns. You know, right off the bat, you're slaying with this shovel, Root Slayer 3. I mean, like it's nothing. Okay. And then you get a gun and you think, oh, this is going to be it. This is the game changer. Right. And then over the course of your playtime, you'll come to realize that that gun gets used about maybe 10 to 20% of the time because the Root Slayer shovel even is better than most of the base weapons. I mean, there's not a whole lot of variation between the types. I mean, you'll see a bunch of different marks, but that's just going to change things like the fire rate or I mean just very very minimal changes and nothing really seems as effective as just taking a shovel to the heads of your enemies.
And that's one of the unfortunate things that you're going to notice very quickly is that it doesn't seem like the gear you get to pick really matters. It doesn't seem like it matters how upgraded your equipment is. If you have like this super optimized loadout, it doesn't really matter. None of the stats really make a difference. There were times where we would find items or unlock items and they would make such a minimal difference. It felt so underwhelming. Like all of your hard work in these missions was for nothing. And the overall gameplay loop outside of that is really fun. It's because it has you going on these missions to these dangerous areas and you're, completing and you're trying to survive in a team of 4 with your friends or just random people. And you guys are just hacking away at all these monsters. These hordes of enemies are overcoming you. And at the end of that, you're really met with such lackluster rewards. And it just doesn't feel like all that work was met with any kind of real reward.
Yeah, so I mean, is it rewarding? Not extremely. But the gold in this game is really in the gameplay. You know, it is a blast to mow through hordes of enemies, most likely with a shovel or some other blunt or bladed instrument. However, it's just not extremely exciting when you get to the end of your match and you've unlocked one weapon that you're going to try and end up just putting to the wayside afterwards. I mean, I would have loved to have seen some sort of difference in between the rarities at the very least, but I mean, a legendary to a common, you're not going to notice any difference in damage. You're not going to notice any difference in the functionality of the weapon. It's just nominal at best. I mean, minimal at best.
And even worse is whenever you get to this game's economy, outside of a mission, you fight through all these hordes of enemies, you do all this work, and assuming that you survive, you come away with all this gold. And whenever you go to spend it, what you're going to find is that one, there's not really a whole lot to spend it on outside of new weapons, which again, there's not a lot of variety of. Or you're going to go looking for new cosmetics, which are strictly cosmetic. They don't really offer you any stat boosts. And you're going to find that there is about 12 different clothing options for your character, and all of them are really just a variety of different colors. So whenever you go and you look at them, you're going to notice that these are outrageously expensive for no reason. And I can't even begin to tell you how they decided which one was going to be worth more, because an example is you're looking at a backpack, and one color is so much cheaper than the other, and it's just an outrageous price difference for seemingly no reason. The only reason I can think it's done this way is to drive you to their in-game DLC cosmetics, which are obviously much cooler, but again, you have to pay real-world money to unlock those.
Oh yeah, and not to mention, I mean, it just kind of tricks you into playing longer. When you're willing to play, I don't know, let's say 50 freaking matches so that you can afford a black backpack instead of a green backpack. I mean, it's not the most rewarding thing in the world. It just kind of tricks you into playing for longer.
Now, talking about classes in this game, it didn't feel like there was really a huge payoff between picking one class or the other. Obviously, some of them did have more of their play styles, but the only real big difference that came out of it that I could tell was that the first thing is each one of them had slightly more unique weapons. Like the Ogren had different heavy weapons that it could use, and the Zealot had a flamethrower, and the Psyker had a staff that would drain the user's life force. The only other big difference outside of the weapons was that there was a bit of a skill tree that you could kind of have some build customization, but it didn't seem like it really mattered too much what you decided to pick.
Yeah, I mean, the builds might be another gold nugget in this game until you get about to the end of your level 30. So, I mean, limited perk points for one, but it's only 3 paths you can take. Now, I did explore them a little bit. I did note that there are some fun little combinations you can do, but it's almost more for just you. It's not actually going to affect your gameplay to any huge extent that, after you get to level 30 and you've got all of the perks, now you're ready for tier 4 difficulty. I mean, it just comes down to, I guess, skill of gameplay and just being used to playing the game. By level 30, you've probably played upwards of 300 matches, so that's really the reason you can play that difficulty.
So this brings us to the final part of the review where we give you our final verdict on if we think you should play
or pass.
And for me, I think it's definitely going to be a game that you need to play. I do think that this is going to be a good way to pass the time with friends. The gameplay inside of the missions is fun. I don't think you're going to be entertained for too long unless you're a big fan of the Warhammer series, but I do think it's worth giving it a try and seeing what you think of it yourself.
And for me, I'm going to rate it a play. I know we had a few negative notes on this one, but the truth is it's a gameplay worth experiencing, especially with friends, as Leslie noted. And I just have to say, I mean, fair warning, we only played about 10 hours before we decided we were kind of bored of it. But that's because we have bigger and better things to get to so that we can review more of these games and get them to you.
Make sure you join us on the next one where we decide if we
Play
or pass.